Blog Talk Radio.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot, oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, and we are inching our way towards Thanksgiving, November 15th. Oh, my goodness. So, PK, how are you doing tonight?
Doing just fine, waiting for our nice rain to hit here. We're supposed to get rain for the next couple of days. Surprise, surprise.
Yes, that is a surprise. Goodness.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
yes,
my,
it is.
well. We've got a great guest tonight. Mark Ireland is with us. He's a psychic medium. He's a great author. We're going to be talking about the soul. And he has a fascinating background. So in just a few minutes, we're going to bring him on, and we're going to get right to it because there's so much to talk about with Mark. So before we do that, PK, what do you got for us? What are the numbers up to?
Well, I want everybody to remember it's a 9-month. Ending old things to make way for the new. There's a couple of weeks left of this month, but we've got the holidays about us, people out shopping or whatever. Be careful, hold tight. Just know that it's that time to wrap up and get rid of people, places, and things that don't fit in your agenda right now. Let them go because you've got some great stuff coming. So take the rest of this month to tidy up what you've got to make sure that you've got room for all these great things that are going to be coming.
Wow, we need great things.
Oh, God, yes,
so
we do.
So this is
That's
how we're going to, are we going to end the year with that then? Great things? Good.
Well, we're going to be December is going to be a 1 month all about fresh starts and new beginnings. So this is a good time to get rid of anything that doesn't fit so that you've got your closet cleaned out and ready to go with good stuff. We've just been carrying too much garbage because of what's going on world-wise, emotionally, and physically. Everybody's burned out and worn out. Just thought it's a chance to recoup a little bit. So,
well, I'm all for that.
I'll be taking some questions next week. If anyone has anything specific they want to, just send us a note with their name and their birthday.
Okay. All right, and our emails are on the website, supernaturalgirls.com, and you can also reach PK at patriciakirkman.com. So send in your questions, and PK will answer them. So that's great. What a nice, generous offer. And I wanted to just also put this out there because I don't know what's going on with time. Now, last week we had a discussion with an author about time travel. It was really fascinating. However, I have to say that I have found it challenging to keep track of the things that should be easy, like what day it is. I really have to. I need to know, audience, is anybody else having that same problem? Because, I mean, yesterday I got up really early and I went to promote the show and get everything set up, and I'm thinking it's Wednesday. And it wasn't Wednesday, but it felt like Wednesday, so I went with it. And it wasn't until late in the day when you and I were talking that I finally realized, it's not Wednesday. But I went through the whole day thinking it was Wednesday. Now, I'd like to think I'm not the only person with this problem. So if any of you are experiencing these time shifts, please let me know.
Yeah. I think in terms of a lot of Patricia's dealing with the fact that this month represents everything that's been going on all year. So everything is out of cattywampus. There's no norm right now. And then, of course, what's going on in the world on top of it. We don't want to know the norm right now.
Yeah. There is no norm. Well, there was no. So Tuesday became Wednesday, but here we are on Wednesday. Okay. So let me know. Yes. Hi. So, anyways, also everybody, just wanted to remind you to go to our homepage. We've got some great health devices there. The Energy Machine. We have Dr. Weber's lasers. We have some wonderful supplements, and you get a discount on all of these things. We don't sell them, but we made arrangements with the companies so that you can get a discount if you purchase from our website. So go ahead and take a look there. We are firm believers that you should take your health into your own hands, and we're always looking for new products to support that. We're watching the collapse of our medical system. Every time either one of us, you or I, turn around, somebody's got another story to tell, which is quite unpleasant about our medical system. So do the best you can to make good lifestyle choices. And take a look at the page, the homepage, see if there's anything there that you feel would support your best health. So tonight, yes, I want to be healthy. It's better than the alternative, so I'll take all the help I can get.
That.
Yes. So our guest tonight is quite amazing. Mark Ireland is the co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, an organization with more than 24,000 members that assists bereaved parents worldwide. He has participated in mediumship research studies conducted by the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia, and he currently operates a medium certification program. He is the author of Soul Shift and a brand new book, The Persistence of the Soul. And he lives in Camas, Washington, and he's here with us tonight. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Patricia. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. And yeah, we want to know all about you because you are so interesting. So please start at the beginning. Tell us how you got into all of this.
Well, growing up, I really wasn't into it that much in the beginning because I grew up with a father who was a pretty prominent psychic and medium who was well known pretty much from the 1950s through the 80s, probably with the 60s and 70s being kind of the pinnacle for his career. And so I grew up in a household where Dad always knew what was going on. And you couldn't get away with anything. I'll give you a couple stories as examples. Actually, before I was even born, my mother and father had just recently been married, and she was working on being a vegetarian and had been successful for a couple of months. And one day she was craving a burger, and she left the house. She had her burger and came back home. And when my dad came home that evening, the first words out of his mouth were, "So, Shirley, did you enjoy your hamburger today?" For my older brother, Shirley, who was 10 years older than I was, he would always figure out what was going on with him, and he had somebody buying him beer when he was underage, so my dad got that stopped, and my brother would go drag racing, so he would deal with that. So it was just that kind of a household. But more importantly, I saw my dad do demonstrations, both psychic-type demonstrations in secular venues, but also in his own church, which was a non-denominational, real progressive kind of church, where spirit messages would come through. And they weren't just fluffy things like, "Oh, Grandma's here and she loves you." They were highly specific with first names, sometimes last names, hobbies that the person had, foods that they liked, things about conversations they'd had with the people that he gave the messages to. So from a young age, I saw that, and it occurred to me, wow, there really is more. There is life after death. We're not just a physical body and a brain. Some part of us does go on. So I had a lot of encouragement from that. I guess a lack of fear of death as a result of that. So as opposed to a lot of folks who are just brought up in a religious home, relying on blind faith, I had more kind of a knowledge, firsthand experience that gave me that sense of confidence in that. So, but despite that, who wants to be their parent? So my dad always said that I was psychic. He thought I was very psychic, but, I didn't see it that way. I mean, I had some episodes here and there, instances that were pretty, startling. One, for example, when I was 18, I was dating a girl, and I had a dream one night that she was seeing another guy, but for some odd reason, I knew his first and last name and what he looked like. So the next day I had mentioned the dream to her, and she says, well, tell me about it. And I'm like, no, it's just a dream. And she goes, please. And so I said, okay, well, I was jealous because you were dating this other guy behind my back. His name was Bob Dooley, and he looked about this tall. He had this color hair and this build. And she's like, I dated a guy named Bob Dooley in Kansas that looked just like that. So, that was kind of one of those things, but they were very sporadic, here or there, not kind of consistent. So, and my dad and I were two different people. He was, I'm more pragmatic and practical. He was more kind of out there and putting his neck on the line all the time and living for the moment more. So I ended up, doing the conventional thing, going to the university. I went to ASU. I got a degree. I got married at a young age. We had a couple of kids, 2 boys. And so I was just cruising along doing the conventional career path, life, business world thing. And was always proud of my dad and always never lost that spiritual side of myself, but just wasn't as engaged with it, I guess I would say. But it was, and then my dad passed in 1992 in January. So it was, 12 years after that, my youngest son, Brandon, passed unexpectedly while hiking the mountains, the McDowell Mountains behind our home in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that shook me back into the reality, of losing a child and going through having your world turned upside down. But I had that, my childhood recollections and what I'd seen all those years and experienced, as something to rely on to help me know that there was more and to cope a little better than most parents probably would in that situation. And one of the first things I mentioned to PK earlier, although my father had been gone for 12 years at that point, my Uncle Robert, who lived in Tucson, was still around, and he had similar abilities to my father. And so I talked to him shortly after Brandon had passed. We didn't know the cause of death. And he said, well, Mark, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. And I said, well, if you could get any kind of message or connection, I'd really appreciate it. And so we hung up. It was 3 days later, I was in the mortuary making arrangements, and we connected by cell phone. And my uncle said, hey, Mark, I wanted to share something with you. I tried to connect last night. I couldn't get anything. But this morning I was doing the morning meditation, as I always do, and your father came to me. And he looked just like he always had. He had visited me before since he passed, but it had been quite a while. But he wanted to let you know that he was there when Brandon passed and that he helped him adjust. Brandon was a little confused, but your dad helped him understand what was happening. And he passed along that Brandon wanted you to know you're the best parents he ever could have had, which is the warm, fuzzy thing we like to hear. But then along with that, we got the evidence. He said, your dad said Brandon's death was caused by a lack of oxygen in his bloodstream that caused his heart to fail. So 2 days later, I got the autopsy results, directly speaking to the physician who had conducted it. And she said, your son's death was caused by a severe asthma attack that caused his blood oxygen levels to drop to a point causing cardiac arrest. So I actually got the cause of death from my uncle 2 days before the autopsy was even done. And we didn't know the cause of death before that. So that was kind of the jolt that pushed me back into my dad's field.
That's an incredible jolt, Mark. My God.
My goodness.
How old was your son?
He was 18 at the time, yeah.
18.
And oddly, earlier that day, I asked him what he was up to, and he told me he was going to hike the mountain. And he went up that mountain all the time with friends. This time he said he was going to go to the top, which wasn't a big concern. But a little later, I got kind of this premonition feeling and an overwhelming sense of concern. And I tried to talk him out of going, but he said, Dad, we're going. Just like, stop your worrying, But lo and behold, that was just a different day. And it was the toughest thing any parent could go through. But by the same token, I never would have taken this path, probably written these books or co-founded an organization that's helping so many people today if that hadn't happened. And really it started with that, and then the journey that I went on that was detailed in my first book, Soul Shift, which is kind of me re-exploring my dad's field and kind of on my own path in my own way.
Yeah. Now, did your son have asthma, or was this something that just came out of the blue this one time?
He had asthma, but it was never that severe, and he had an inhaler. So he, his best buddy was with him and tried to revive him, and he said that the symptoms were unlike any asthma attack he'd ever noticed, with Brandon before. Brandon did say that he felt like his heart was beating rapidly and his arms were kind of numb, but he didn't really say that he was having real difficulty breathing. He did, he had a normal inhaler, but it did nothing to change things. So, it was unusual in that, he had asthma, but it was fairly mild. So this was just really beyond anything we could have imagined.
Jeez. Yeah, so it was under control, and he did have his inhaler, but that didn't do any good. Wow. What a shock. You must have felt shock over this. So unexpected, your son being so young. And also the fact that he had gone up this mountain so many times before. It wasn't like there was something new.
Right.
So he had done this hike previously without issue.
Yeah, and, the way I look at it now today, I guess maybe it was just his time. As hard as that would be for me to accept when it happened, we all are only here for so long, and I think we have an expectation that there's a certain order we're going to go in. It doesn't always work out exactly that way.
No, it does not.
Would I like to have him back in a physical form, living his life with us? Of course I would. But, you can't really change the way things happen, and if you want to call it destiny or whatever, things just happen and you have to deal with it and go forward. And, if there is a positive to come from it, it's that I have been able to share experiences with other people that have helped them progress, who have had kids pass. I probably had a number of people write me after who read one of my books and said that they had contemplated suicide before that, and that it helped them have enough hope that they chose not to do that. And then with the Helping Parents Heal organization too, it just ballooned. I could touch on how that started too later if you'd like, but we had, we've got 26,000 members worldwide now, 175 affiliate chapters, and we had our second ever conference in 2022 in Phoenix area. We drew 900 people total, and we're going to do it again in 2024, and we anticipate 1,000, which is really the full capacity of the hotel. And in that venue, I had another half dozen people come up to me, and I don't know if they were talking about the books that I wrote that they read or the organization or a combination, but they said, I had a half a dozen people say, I wanted to tell you saved my life, thank you. So, when you're told that by somebody, that what you did was important and made a difference, Well,
you're really doing the work of angels with your group, because I can tell you from my experience as a therapist so many years ago that there is nothing worse than the death of a child. Nothing.
No.
Yeah.
And it's just so many people never can recover, but it also tends to tear families apart. So the parents get a divorce, and that makes everything so much harder. So what you're doing and what you're offering to people is so important. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. I have to give credit to Elizabeth Boyson, because she's the co-founder and she's the president of the organization. And she and a woman named Irene Bouvalidis do all the work on the operational level day to day. I'm the chairman of the board, but that's more of an oversight role. I'm still working full time, so I just don't have that kind of time to commit to the organization, but I am involved. But she's really the day-to-day backbone of the organization, along with Irene. And even how the whole thing came together is rather interesting. It really goes back to 2009. I was doing a workshop to promote my first book, and during a break, a woman came up to me and her name's Suzanne Wilson. She said, hey, I just moved here from Florida to Arizona, and I came to this event because I wanted to meet like-minded people. And then she mentioned to me that she had come into contact with a woman whose son had also died on a mountain, although it was the Himalayas. He was apparently a student at the University of Arizona, and there was a student trip to the Himalayas, and they took them up the bus up the mountain too fast. Like there's a limit for how many feet per day you're supposed to go up. They exceeded that, and he ended up dying of altitude sickness. So I said to Suzanne, I said, well, if you see the woman again, please give her a copy of my book, and here's contact information for her. She can reach out to me if she wants to. It was no longer than a day or two later, I get a call from Elizabeth. She says, I read your book in one sitting. I want to meet you and your wife. And so we got together pretty quickly, and she said that she had started at the time it was just a Facebook group for bereaved parents called Parents United in Loss. And she was going to have her first ever in-person meeting. And she asked me if I'd be her first speaker, and I said, sure. So that happened a few weeks later. I went to this, and she had her first meeting. There was probably 30 to 40 people there, and it went really well. Then she started having these meetings like every month, and I'd go when I could. And then now fast forward to late 2011, I was leaving a corporate job, and kind of thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I talked to Tina Powers, another Tucson resident who's a medium friend of mine who's really, really gifted. She actually used to be a news anchor there in Tucson, but she found her real calling was doing the mediumship. So that's what she does now. And she said, Mark, I think your real purpose in life is to help other people, parents who have been through the same thing you have. Maybe you could think about starting an organization of some sort to do that. I said, okay. And I kind of mulled that over. And then I thought, Elizabeth's got a good thing going here, but it's just one group, one location. And, she doesn't have a website. She doesn't have a newsletter. And what if I approached her and see if she wanted to partner? So I called her up and I said, hey, would you be interested in partnering with me to blow this thing out to something bigger to help more people? What we could do is blueprint what you do at your meetings and then share that out in other cities and other locations for people who would want to have their own groups in other locations. And then I'll help you set up a website, and we'll get a newsletter going so we can get this thing churning, more frequently for more people. And she says, oh, I'd love that. And I said, and maybe consider a different name, something like Helping Parents Heal. And she says, oh, I love that name. She says, I didn't like the name Parents United in Loss because it sounded like a downer to me. And it's just exploded since then. And the main reason is because there are other bereaved parents groups out there, but we're the only one that allows open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence. And that's makes a big difference, Some of the other groups, we end up getting people from the other groups that come to us and say, I've been going to their meetings for 10 years, and really people just keep going over the same ground over and over, how upset they are, how mad they are, how hurt they are, and they're in the same place they were 10 years ago. Right. And to me, that's partially because they lack that hope element. There's no discussion about, that they still exist. Maybe it's not the same. Maybe it's different, but they still exist, and you can still have a form of a relationship with them today. So that's a big differentiator. I think for well-rounded healing, there are a lot of factors that come into play, and therapy is definitely valuable. But in addition to that, I think support from a good family and friends, if you have that, not everybody does, but if you do, that's a plus. And for them to come to understand how to converse with you in a helpful way. A lot of parents want to talk about their child who has passed, but yet friends and family are afraid to go there. They try and change the subject,
Yes.
Also, meeting people who have been through the same thing and developing relationships with them. And we can help with that because we have all these members now, so you meet and you have camaraderie with them. In fact, at that conference that I mentioned, the employees of the hotel were deathly afraid that it was going to be a real bummer and real downer of a group because, they heard that all these people had lost kids. And then by the end of it, they're like, you are the best group we've ever had. It was so uplifting and so upbeat, and part of that was not only because we had some phenomenal speakers and presenters, but we also had the opportunity for people to make new friends and share. And it was very uplifting for them. And I think, you know, when people get to a certain point and they can provide service in some way, whether it's working at a soup kitchen or joining a foundation that does something positive, whatever, that comes back to help you too. I think another factor is to let go of feelings of responsibility. A lot of parents will blame themselves, you know, they'll hold feelings of guilt, like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that. Just like me. Even with Brandon, I thought, you know, I could have lied to him that day because I knew there was something he wanted to do and say, oh, I've arranged this for you, Brandon. It was to meet this musician from a rock band that he liked. But then I thought, you know, that's being manipulative, and he's 18 years old. I couldn't really do that. And to think back that way is just, there's no constructive element to it. You have to just let that go. Most parents couldn't have changed the outcome, no matter what they think. And I think another part of that is forgiving other people who you hold accountable. I've seen parents who are still so angry at someone they blame for that, whether it's because of an accident or a doctor or whatever. That's just hurting you, you know. I know it's not easy to forgive necessarily. I'm just saying that it does hurt you when you hold on to that and can't release that at some point. And then I think the last piece is this afterlife evidence piece. It's the hope piece. To have that's a huge difference between just trying to go about this is so, you know, like we're biological robots or something, and you're just trying to treat, you know, the body, you know, instead of the heart and the soul.
Well, there's so much to the healing process with this, but just the fact that you survived it intact, it gives other people hope, I would imagine, right? Just knowing your story and knowing what you've been through, and here you are today, that gives everybody that's gone through this hope that they can get through it too. But it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, and there's so many members of our organization that have gotten through it. I'm still married. In fact, our marriage got stronger. Our relationship got even stronger afterwards. So I guess you could go the other way, but we actually went that way. And I think part of it's because we didn't blame each other, and we also had that hopefulness because of our understanding that there's more to this than just physical existence. But you're right. I think seeing a role model, if you will, or somebody who's, wow, you guys got there, so maybe it's possible for me to get there too.
Yes, yeah. What a big help. Gosh, this is inspiring. And then your work as a psychic medium, how does your talent work alongside with this?
So I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there in terms of what you were given in my bio, maybe, because I'm not a practicing psychic or medium. Now, I will say that I do believe I have abilities to some extent, and they do pop up sporadically. It was really my father who did that, you know, as first and foremost. What, you know, when I drew back into this field, the way it happened was more a case of wanting connection with my son and wanting communication. So that's really how it started. And the first thing that I did was, even before that message from my uncle, I went into a darkened room, which was a walk-in closet, and I tried to meditate quietly. And I wanted a connection with my son, a direct connection, not through a medium or anything. So while sitting there in a meditative state, an image of his face scrolled by, and it was very joyful, happy-looking, surrounded with just an aura of joy. So I thought, oh, that feels good. But then right after that, there was a symbol that passed in front of me that looked like a cross with an oval loop at the top. Now, I'd seen those, but I didn't know the meaning. And I am a little left-brained, so that analytical side of me, I had to go to Google it and find out, well, what is that? And then I discovered it's an Ankh, which is the oldest cross of human history, about 5,000 years old, an Egyptian symbol, and the lower portion of the cross representing physical life, the oval loop at the top representing eternal life. So what I got was a coded message telling me my son was joy in eternal life. Whereas if I already knew what that symbol meant, I would have probably said, oh, my subconscious gave me that to make me feel better. But it didn't. I had to go research it. So that was one of the very first things. And then my uncles. And then the next thing that happened was about 3 weeks later, I was watching the Channel 12 News, the NBC affiliate in Phoenix, and they had a clip on a research study being done at the University of Arizona at the time where they were testing mediums under controlled conditions. Mm-hmm. So for this particular one, they had the medium Alison Dubois, who at that time was relatively unknown, later became famous because of the network show Medium. She was separated from the sitters and had to give messages to the sitters about their deceased loved one. And then they debrief with them at the end, and I was impressed because what she gave was a lot of specific information. It wasn't anything general. And they confirmed the accuracy of all this. And I thought to myself, wow, I'd love to get a reading from her, and I'd love to be in that lab someday. Little did I know both things would later happen. So then the very next day, I get a call from a man that was friends with my father. His name's Jerry Concert. So he says to me, and he was calling from Dallas, so he didn't even know about this news clip or anything. And he says, hey, Mark, I know what you've been through, and I know someone who might be able to help you. Her name's Alison Dubois, and here's a phone number you can call to get an appointment with her. So I could see the synchronicity of that event, and that my dad probably was trying to help me out there. So I did get an appointment, but she was even then she was had a long wait list because she was well regarded, and she had a following at the time, even before the show Medium. So that happened in August of the year, and so a couple interesting things, tidbits from that. When I did go to see her, 2 weeks before I saw her, a man that knew my father gave me a box. I opened the box up, and there was a bunch of 8.5 by 11 typewritten pages, and then the cover page, it said, Your Psychic Potential, A Guide to Psychic Development by Richard Ireland, 1973. I'm like, what's this? And he goes, it's a book that your dad had put together years ago, but it was never published. And I'm like, well, how did you get it? He says, well, you were out of state at the time, but your dad, just before his passing, gave it to me for safekeeping. I said, that's been 12 years. Why are you giving this to me now? He says, I just feel like I'm supposed to. I'm like, okay. So I took the book with me. 2 weeks later, I have the reading with Alison Dubois. One of the first things she says to me is, I have your father here, and he's showing me a book, but I feel it's his book, and he's handing it to you for you to take forward. Does that make any sense to you? I'm like, yeah, I think I get that. So I actually did eventually. I eventually got the book published, too, in 2011, so it's out there, and I wrote a forward for it. But during that meeting, the reading with Alison Dubois, there was a number of other great validations. My wife and I had just had our 25th anniversary shortly before that, and she didn't know anything really about me. All she knew is that I had a psychic father. She knew nothing else. And she said, well, your son wants to congratulate you on your 25th anniversary, which had just happened 6 weeks ago, so that was pretty cool. She also described, she said, I feel tightness in my chest, like I'm drowning, I feel like I'm drowning. Well, the autopsy physician had told me that Brandon's death, when he had a severe what he had happen only occurs in cases of drownings and severe asthma attacks where the lungs expand to the point of nearly touching in the middle in an effort to capture more oxygen. So Alison actually physically felt, that sense of drowning, which was essentially identical to the same condition that Brandon had. She shared a number of other great validations as well. I'm trying to think what I've got here. Yeah. She shared my wife's name, which she didn't know, and my sister-in-law's name and some other details. I just don't have it all in front of me right now, and I'm going back in the mental archives quite a ways here. But I'll give you another
quite well known for her abilities. Yeah. But let me ask you, as you're sharing these. Yes.
She has a podcast too, and I was just on it.
Oh, no kidding. Great.
Yeah.
So, I love that you're sharing these because I would imagine with every single thing she shared that was so right on, it made you feel better and better. So was there anything else that she told you as a message from your son that made you feel good?
There was just so many things. And again, this was back in 2004, so I can't remember all the details. Those were a couple of the highlights. But I ended up getting 4 readings that were chronicled in that first book. That was the first of them. But what was really interesting was the overlap on information between them and how consistent a lot of it was. Now, each one kind of had some specialty of its own that was really something amazing. but a lot of them had similar things. For example, now this is something that can't be proven, but that my son had a small dog on the other side. So if I hear that once, I think, okay, maybe he got a dog, after he passed, or it was an old dog that we used to have or whatever. But it was mentioned at each reading, small, and in this case specified a small dog. So that was interesting. And I'll come back to the readings in a second because I could share some other phenomenal things from those. But I think one of the direct communication things we had beyond that was one of the most remarkable things, involved my wife, an experience she had. So go back to 2 weeks after Brandon passed. The very first intuitive I spoke to gave me a reading. She wasn't really a full-fledged medium. She was more psychic, but she had some mediumship. And I just remember her saying, within 6 months, Brandon will appear to you at the side of your bed. Okay? So 6 months later, we're going to go on a cruise, and it's to celebrate Brandon's high school graduation. Well, since Brandon couldn't physically go with us, we took our older son, Stephen, and Brandon's best buddy, Stu, who had tried to revive him on the mountain. And we went for a week. Well, before going, we had a musician friend named James Linton. Now, we'd come to know James because he had actually been on the mountain the day of Brandon was there, and he tried to help, but he arrived too late. But after that, we found him because he put an entry into an online obituary with his contact information. So during that 6-month period, we got to know him, became friends. So here we are, 6 months later, we're leaving for this cruise, and he asked if he could borrow Brandon's bass guitar. Brandon was a bassist. James was a guitarist, composer, and singer, and he had his own in-home studio, and he was working on some new songs, and he wanted to use the bass, so we said, sure, you can borrow it. So we go on this cruise. The day we come back, my wife is sitting at the foot of our bed, and she suddenly feels Brandon's presence, and she actually sees a shadow figure out of her peripheral vision to her right. So she's, really over the moon about this and tells me about it. I'm stoked as well. But what made it even more compelling was the very next day we get a call from James, and he says, hey, Susie, I've got something to tell you, but I don't know how to share it. And she thought he was going to say, oh, he broke the bass guitar, but that wasn't it at all. He said, well, I was recording this song, and while I was sitting there, I felt another presence in the room with me. And then I saw a shadow figure out of my peripheral vision. And then I saw flashes of white light. And I thought I was just hallucinating, so I went and got something to eat, and then I took a shower, and I drank some water, and I came back. But each time I came back, it got stronger and stronger. And so finally I said, okay, Brandon, what do you want? And at that point, James said he was guided to redo the lyrics to the song and redo the bass line. And at the end of it, he said, and the song is entitled The Other Side. And he said, this is the best song I've ever written, but I didn't write it. So that was a pretty outstanding experience. I mean, aside from the song, just having those two people have identical experiences with the shadow figure discernible through peripheral vision, back to back, without him knowing about her experience, I thought was pretty phenomenal.
That is absolutely. Now, for you, when you sense him and you see certain things, and is it a regular occurrence so that you have a regular communication with him, or is this just still like a once-in-a-while thing?
It's a once-in-a-while thing. I mean, we're pretty healed. It's been quite a while. I love him. I think of him every day. He's always in my prayers. Sometimes I'll miss him and I'll want to connect and I'll meditate on him and I'll feel like a rush come through me. It's more of a feeling now, like an electrical charge, if you will. And I know so many mediums, and I know a lot of researchers too, but I know so many mediums, I can see them and they'll just sporadically give me a message. One that just happened a couple of weeks ago. It was so funny. There's a really outstanding medium in Gilbert, Arizona named Sarah Gibson. So I was out with her and another medium who's outstanding, Michelle Claire. And so I'm just sitting there and we're talking, and I mentioned to Farrah that Brandon was a bass player. And she says, okay, he's here. And he tells me that his new bass had one extra string. Well, his first bass was a 4-string bass. 3 months before he passed, he had his 18th birthday, and as a gift, we got him a 5-string bass. So it was a bass with an extra string. That's a pretty specific, random thing.
For sure.
Yes.
Then she says, your son's showing me taking the strings off the guitar like you're restringing it. Well, just the day before or 2 days before, I had been in Prescott and met with a friend there who had a Martin guitar, and I play guitar, and she's kind of a beginner at it. And she says, I need a new set of strings for this. So we went to a music store. I bought her a set of strings, and I took all the old strings off and restrung the guitar for her. So that's like totally random as well. So anyhow, I get that kind of stuff all the time from other people. So I feel like I'm touched in, you know, to the extent that I need to be. He's doing his work over there, and I'm doing mine here. But we touch base now and then, and I know that if I need him, he's just a thought away.
That's wonderful.
That's a wonderful feeling. Yeah. How comforting.
I think he's inspired me with a couple of songs, too, because I've written and recorded some songs in the studio that were very spiritual in nature. I'm going to have my webmaster link them onto my regular website, but I have a separate website from my music, but there's a song called What You Can't See. Anybody could just Google it and say Mark Ireland. Actually, I called the band name the Mark Ireland Experiment, and the song is called What You Can't See. And that's when I felt inspired to write, and I've had pretty positive feedback about that. But anyhow, yeah, I've had a pretty multifaceted life.
Yeah, and you decided you didn't want to go full-fledged into psychic mediumship. Is that a decision you made?
Here's what I would say about that. For right now, I have so much on my plate. You know, I have a full-time job still. I help with Helping Parents Heal to the extent that I can. I'm doing the writing. I'm doing these kind of podcasts and radio shows and things like that. So I don't know that I have the time or dedication right now. The other part is it's a lot of responsibility. If you're going to read for grieving people, you better be really good. And that's why I put a medium certification program together, and that's another time consumer as well. Really, after my first book came out and I started doing talks, people were always coming to me saying, who's a good medium I can go to? At that time, I knew maybe half a dozen, but they were celebrity mediums, and a lot of them had really long wait lists, and some charge a lot, you know, because they're of demand. So I thought, you know, there have to be really good people out there that are just undiscovered. So I consulted Dr. Emily Williams Kelly at the University of Virginia, and I'd participated with her in a research experiment she had done, and I learned more about her protocols. So I kind of took those as a baseline. Then I reached out to my friend Tricia Robertson, who had been the president of the Scottish Society of Psychical Research, and had her kind of go over that with me, and I built my own protocols to develop a testing program where anyone who wants to apply has to go through 5 blinded readings via Zoom with no video, and they can't know who they're reading for. They're given the first name of the person when the reading starts. And then the readings are recorded, later transcribed and graded for accuracy. And there's certain parameters of specificity and accuracy they have to achieve to pass. And this started in 2014. I now have 41 certified mediums on the site. I've funded the thing entirely myself. I make no money off of it. It's just a reference tool. It's a public service thing that I put together for people. And that's where that certification program came into being. So, you know, could I do this? Do I have the ability? I've had some experiences that tell me maybe, probably, I don't know that it's at my dad's level, and it's been very sporadic, but maybe that's just because I haven't really focused on doing it full time. But I'd still have to, you know, if I was going to dedicate myself to it, that's pretty much, you know, the end of my taking a journalistic approach to these matters and writing books in the way that I am. It would be, from that point on, it would be like, okay, that was what I did then, and now I'm doing this. And I would have to really, I think I'd have to work hard to make sure that I was at a level that I felt like I could really help grieving people and not set them back, because a good reading can help, but a bad reading can set people back.
But
I'll
good
give you an example of what.
Excellent.
Yeah, please.
If you'd like to hear, I'll give you an example of probably the most phenomenal thing that I've ever done in terms of what I consider mediumship. And it really gave me a feeling for, at least for me, how it works or how it would work for others. And I know, having talked to mediums and interviewed them, they all get information a little bit different. You know, some get more visual, like visions in their mind's eye. Some get visions externally. Some hear it in their mind. Some even can occasionally auditorily hear. So, and some have clairsentience, they have a sense of, just like Allison described, that feeling in her chest from Brandon's passing. So there's all these different things. But so I was, for a 3-year stint, I'd been invited to go to this spiritualist church in San Francisco to do a talk. It was called the Golden Gate Spiritualist Church. It still exists, but it was founded in 1924 by a woman named Florence Becker, who by all accounts had abilities very similar to my father, which is, really at the top of the line. And so she founded it in 24, and she passed away in 1970, but the church still went on. So I would go there for this 3-year period to do a talk, and I brought along Tina Powers, the medium friend of mine that I mentioned earlier, and she would do readings for the congregation. So this particular time, she was kind of bugging me, saying, "Mark, I think you're going to get a message to share. Will you share it during the visit there to the church?" And I'm like, "Sure, if I get something, I will." But she hounded me about this over and over again. I'm like, "What's going on here?" Even walking into church the day of the session, she's like, "Mark, do you promise to share any messages you get?" I'm like, "Yes, Tina." So I went into the healing room. They had a room where people were getting healings. And I sat on the bench to a piano or organ, shut my eyes, and quietly tried to silence my mind. I was more just trying to get mentally prepared for the talk, but not overthink it. I was just trying to meditate. But my mind went totally blank, which was pretty rare for me, almost kind of like the time in the closet that I mentioned where I saw the vision of Brandon. But it was just like a blank slate. But while I was in that state, a name popped into my mind. It was Max. And then immediately after that, Maxine. And I thought, oh, maybe it's Maxine and not Max. I didn't hear these. I didn't see them. They just came to me kind of like an idea would come to you, or maybe a memory would come to you, but they just came like that. I can't even describe it other than say it was just like an idea coming to you. It just popped in. So then it's time for my talk. I give the talk, and at the end I say, "Hey, Tina made me promise that I'd share anything I might get, so I have to ask if the names Max or Maxine mean anything to anyone here." And the pastor of the church said, well, Max and Maxine were twins that were born to the church founder, Florence Becker, and they were delivered stillborn, and they grew up on the other side. He says, "I think we know who is here right now." Wow. And then he said, this is a secret known only to a couple of old, longtime church board members. And then after the service, he took me upstairs to show me a painting. He said, and I think it was Florence Becker's work. He said, "See this landscape painting and the long winding road, those two little figures at the end? That's Max and Maxine." So it's like, to me, in hindsight, I'm looking at this saying, here's something so subtle that I could have easily dismissed it and just said it was my imagination. But yet it was so specific with two uncommon names that were both meaningful and accurate. It's like, geez. So that kind of tells me how it could work, at least for me, where you don't even want to say it. But yet it is accurate, So I think it's part of that is maybe what made my dad so good at it, partially besides it being part of what he was born with, was he grew up at a time in rural Ohio with no radio, no TV, no telephone, obviously no smartphones. And so he had a lot of quiet time in nature. And so, today we're just overrun with everything. And everything's at a fevered pitch. It's all loud. It's all distracting. And to quiet our minds to a point where we can actually pick up on that subtle information is something that not many people think about doing or even being able to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and it's coming from all sides, all kinds of communication. It does make it a challenge. But your dad, as you mentioned, grew up in a different time, a lot easier.
Yeah.
But still remarkable talent in your family. Now, you have a son and you have grandchildren. Does he have any of these abilities?
He does. I think he's more on the psychic side, but he'll have something come to him, just kind of like me, where it's a sporadic thing. I remember a couple that he knows that he's good friends with, they were going to have a baby girl, and I wish I could remember what the name was, but they said, guess the name that we're going to give her. And he got it right away, and it was not a common name. It was something really wild. I can't remember her name, but it was pretty. So he did that, and he's had other things where he felt like something was going to go a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
I remember he had friends when he was younger that were working at a job, and they had some sort of work contract at work that said, that if they resigned, they would get a certain bonus for a period of time. And he warned them, like, I think you're going to get fired. You better resign first. And so they did. And then the owner, it was a small business. The owner's like, somebody must have told you you're getting fired, so I'm not going to pay you that bonus. So those kinds of things, just here and there, sporadic kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wouldn't be surprised
it
if my
definitely runs
granddaughters
in the
end up
family
with it too. It does.
Oh, yeah.
Even on my dad's side, my great-grandmother, I guess, read tea leaves. His mother, my grandmother on my father's side, she became a trance medium later in life. And then even on my mom's side, too, there was, my mom was a little psychic. I had two aunts that were very psychic. And so, yeah, and people that research it, like Julie Beischel down there at Windbridge in Tucson, she would tell you that it runs in family lines. So I think there's a physiological component to it as well. Even though we're a soul and not a brain, in this world we live in a body that has a brain that takes our consciousness and filters it down for what we need to do in this environment that we live in. And I think, some people have a brain that's configured more to receive this kind of information than others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, there's some kind of frequency that they can jump onto and stay there and get information from the other side. Now, with all the work that you've done with families, and I know you're talking about a lot of research that your friends are doing, I'm sure that, one of the biggest questions parents ask themselves is, why? It's not supposed to be this way. Your children aren't supposed to precede you in death. So what's the reason for this? And of course, we've all heard some theories like, well, they were done with their work on this planet and off they went. But have you come across anything else that would explain how people and why people die when they do?
Well, there's a couple different angles you could take. One, some people believe in pre-soul planning, like we existed before we got here. We actually had a roadmap that we had a hand in for the life we're living now, so that we can learn the lessons that we need to learn to round our soul out, or to assist other people on their path, or to serve a certain role. So, if that's true, and I think there's something to it, I don't know that it's down to this precise every little detail kind of thing, but if there's a general roadmap for our life and we have a role, maybe a lot of these kids, they pass to help other people in a way. Like I look at Brandon and the type of person that he was very loving, very caring toward people who were not friended by other people. So he's very sensitive and very thoughtful of other people. And he didn't really care that much about stuff, or recognition. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of more of an old soul or advanced person. And it's ironic that so many of these parents tell me, like after reading the description of Brandon in my books, they're like, my son was just like that. My daughter was just like that. So many of them sound like, they're more advanced. They're not really into the worldly stuff as much. They care about people at a deep level. They're, they're not wrapped up into how they're viewed as much. So to me, those are characteristics of somebody who's more evolved. So, I guess I think there may be something to that. Pardon?
Do you feel that they were here for our lessons?
That may well be. I think, in some ways I could see maybe he's my teacher in a way now, and maybe I'm my dad's teacher in a way. I don't know. My dad couldn't finish his work here. He did great work. He was a pioneer. But now, he couldn't tie up all the loose ends while he was here. So maybe I'm helping do that and keep his legacy going.
But that's your job now, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, too, because I'm a pretty grounded person who's educated and I can communicate with just lay people, average, everyday people, or educated people, I have credibility. People could trust and believe what I have to say just because of how I approach it. Where, if somebody like my dad who did that, and my dad was a very intelligent man too, but, they maybe just wouldn't be as open, so I think that's part of my role and why maybe I spent those years in the business world and learning how to communicate and develop critical thinking and learning how to write well and all those kinds of things came back to be useful later on in my life.
Definitely.
Definitely sounds right.
Yeah, it feels like you're in the perfect place in your life to do your own work. And how do you feel now about this loss? Is it still, I mean, it's always a loss. It's always there. But what's the difference between then and now? How has it transformed and moved through you?
I think if I think back to the very first instant I was notified and the first couple of weeks, you're in a very tough spot. You're in a state of shock, and that's physical shock as well as mental shock. So you want to sleep, then you can't sleep. You want a company, you don't want company. You're not hungry, then you want to eat something. You're just unsettled. You want to be with the people who you love that you're closest to. They're crying, you're crying. You're going through pieces where you break down and where you don't. But what I will tell you is, anyone in true grief is going to go through that. And if they haven't, they put it off and they eventually have to deal with it. But for us, that process was really quick compared to most people I've observed. I mean, within 2 weeks, we were starting to function decently. And within 3 months, I'd say, we were pretty far along the healing path. Whereas, a lot of folks, it takes a lot longer. And some of them, like you said earlier, never come out of it. They go in the corner, they're angry or they feel guilty or whatever, and they want back what they had before. They have to come to accept that, they can still have a relationship, but it's different. Their child still exists, but it's different. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same as it was. So you have to get to that point of acceptance. But it's like that for all of us because we're all only here for a certain amount of time. And we're souls, we're going to go on, and that's a permanent home, I think. Maybe we reincarnate, but ultimately I think the other side is our true home. But this is just like a stopping point for experience. And I think the reason we come here is because it's difficult and because it poses challenges that don't exist on the other side, that force us to learn to be compassionate, that force us to learn what pain feels like. So that we can understand what others are going through, so that we can become better people and more refined souls than we were before.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a very tough, but
point of view.
But and I think as time goes on, it may be easier for people to look at things differently. But I would imagine it's a long process for most people. You and your wife are obviously devoted to each other and your family, and you were able to take the bull by the horns and charge through this, and you did a great job. But I know a lot of people need your help so that they can also have a similar successful experience of walking through this kind of profound grief that's so shocking that it's not supposed to be, where your children die before you. That's not supposed to happen. So I think the fact that we both had something beyond faith, we had knowing, was a big difference. And the fact that we had so many signs early on and these connections with the mediums and so on just made a big difference, And I think with Helping Parents Healed, why that group is successful, I think in part, is because we offer that element where people can share their spiritual experiences. They want to share these signs that they have. They want to share the stuff they experience with other people. And if you allow them to do that, it's very healing. And even healing the stories from others. Or there's a saying I've heard that I think is pretty cool. Say if a medium's in a gallery reading and shares a great message for somebody, a message for one is a message for all. So if you get that evidence, even if it's not for you directly because they can't make it to everybody, you could, enjoy that and appreciate that evidence that was just shared of those specific validations, knowing that your kid's okay too. Yes. Oh, gosh. Now, Mark, what about, how does somebody get in touch with you and your group? And do they have access then to this list of certified mediums so that they can get help from one of them? How does this whole thing work?
So I'll make it really easy for you. I have my own personal website, and on that I have links to everything I've described to you. On my website, there's a link to the Certified Medium page. There's a link to Helping Parents Heal. There's a link to videos of my father's psychic demonstration on Steve Allen in 1971, and many other resources. They're all on my site. And my site is simply markirelandauthor.com. That's Mark with a K, Ireland like the country, and the word author, markirelandauthor.com. You can find all that, and my books are obviously there, and I have a media page with a few clips people might find interesting, like when I was at the University of Arizona doing the test there. That was actually filmed for a Discovery Channel episode, and I have a clip of that people can see. That was with a medium named Lori Campbell, and she did a great job. I mean, she couldn't see me, wasn't allowed to talk to me. I couldn't talk to her, rather. There was a mediator, or I guess you'd say a proxy, who was asking questions of her, and she had to answer. But, she just, since I brought it up, I'll go ahead and tell you a few things from that. I had to sit behind her. She couldn't see me. And then she was asked the first question, I believe, and this is my memory, but she was asked a lot of questions and gave a lot of detail. But initially she says, the sitter is wanting to connect with Brandon, and Brandon is and then before they could even say it, the medium said son of the sitter. Wow. So then he went on and said, how did Brandon die? Can you give me his cause of death? And she says, it's in my chest. Chest feels so heavy, like there's a weight on it, and I feel like I want to throw up. Well, his buddy Stu told me that just before he passed out and then passed away, he did vomit, and he had even made light of it, saying, I threw up in my hair, which made me happy to hear he was joking about it. I don't think he knew how serious things were. And she went on to say, is there anything that the deceased person, Brandon, could share with the sitter to let them know it's him? She says, well, I think he's writing a book about him, a book right now, and it's about him, about Brandon. And that was when I was actually working on the book Soul Shift. And this ended up being one of the last chapters, the detailing what happened in that experiment. So, again, I kind of rambled on here, but I wanted to give you, since I brought it up, I thought I'd share a tidbit about that. But the clip of it,
we appreciate it.
It doesn't have the whole reading, but it has some of the key points, and I think people might enjoy seeing that. And I have a short documentary on there, too.
Well, and we're so appreciative of the fact that you have a list that people can see of people that are certified, because it is very difficult, and we get questions about this all the time from our audience of who can they contact and have a reading and know that they're working with the right person who does have this true ability. So you're making it a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, that was my intent. And, you can never guarantee a good reading. Sometimes it doesn't work.
No, right.
It could be for a variety of reasons. It could be the medium is not feeling well. Or my dad always said that his psychic abilities kind of waned and they went up and down with the like the tides of the sea, So sometimes the medium is at the top of their game and others there's not. But by having a list of vetted people, the odds are greatly improved that you're going to have a good session. And most of the people on there that I know, they're high-integrity people. They would give you a refund if you don't get a good session.
Don't you feel sometimes
that
the person isn't supposed to know the additional information at that point yet?
I'm sorry, PK, I couldn't hear you.
I said, don't you feel that sometimes the person is not supposed to have that information yet, and that's why it's held back a bit? And then another time it could be totally...
I think, sometimes there's a difference between what people want and what they need in a reading.
Right.
And sometimes they're going to get what they need and not what they want. So, I don't know, I think Spirit holds back things maybe that because they have a broader view of things. So they maybe know more about the whole picture as it's unfolding than we do and know what's best for us and things like that, Even along those lines, I can think of my dad had this rule where if he was doing a reading for somebody and he knew, say, for example, they had cancer, and if it was terminal, even though they didn't know it, he would not mention it to them. If he knew he was Spirit told him that they would not recover, and that, you know, he didn't want them to worry about something they couldn't control. However, if he knew that it was early and they could get treatment, he would mention that to them, that they needed to go get checked out by a doctor, and he would do that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of like that, where he used his own discernment there, but sometimes I think that the medium gets what they're supposed to get to share with the person, and maybe not stuff that the sitter may want, but they're not going to get, you know, like maybe somebody wants to know how their loved one died. And maybe it was a violent, horrific death, and they don't really need to know that, you know, because the person's soul is now on the other side, and they're doing fine. But to hear that would just create agony for that person. They might get hung up on that and never be able to set that aside.
Right.
Very true.
Gosh. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What a wonderful evening we've had with you.
Definitely.
And also, everybody, the website is markirelandauthor.com, where you can get all of this information about Mark's books and the list and the groups and anything that you may need for yourself or that a friend of yours may need. Feel free to pass that on. So again, the name of Mark's new book is The Persistence of the Soul. And this is available on Amazon, I'm sure, with Soul Shift, your other book. So you can go get and read those books right from Amazon. Have it the next day or maybe the same day if you're lucky.
Yeah, and the website has links to all the books, too, to make it easy. In fact, Amazon now has the book in 11 different countries. So they're all over the globe these days. I was kind of surprised. But there's links to all of Amazon US and all the countries that have it, and Barnes & Noble, and all those are there as well.
Oh, terrific. Great. Well, that is wonderful. Well, Mark, God bless you and all the work you're doing. Please keep us posted. I know there's going to be another book, so please let us know so we can have you back on the show. But this has been so enlightening and so inspirational. Thank you.
You're welcome, and you're right, because I'm actually working on another book that it's taken me a long time to complete, but it's going to be about what it was like for me to grow up with the father I had. So hopefully
wonderful.
in a year or two we'll have that.
Oh, that's
great.
Thanks for
having me. I really enjoyed it.
Well, we did too, Mark. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, we'll be back next week with another great show, and until then, we'll see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for another radio adventure with Supernatural.